What is going on, guys? Well, we are just about a week and a half out from this year's Academy Awards, the Oscars, and last year being a year that I pushed myself to watch as many new films in theaters as I possibly could and ended up racking up over 120 of those. This is actually the first year in my entire life that I have already seen all of the Best Picture nominees when the nominees dropped. Most years I've seen most of them or a good chunk of them, but there is a few of them that I either don't have any interest in or just don't have time to check out. And since this is the first year where the homework's already been done, I figured why not? Let me jump on the train and let's talk about the Best Picture nominees, of which there are 10 of them. And I'm going to rank them based off of my own enjoyment of them. And just for fun, I'm actually going to throw in an extra ranking in here, which I'll detail somewhere in some overlay footage of which movie I think is most likely to win the Best Picture Oscar, which is absolute speculation. There's no hard data. I mean, you could speculate all day long about what the other awards ceremonies have given Best Picture and kind of bounce off of that, but that's purely for fun and for everybody to kind of debate. So while I'm going through this, let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comment section on all 10 of these Best Picture nominees, which ones you liked, which ones maybe you didn't like, and also give a ranking on which ones you think are the most or least likely to walk away with the Oscar. But really quick, before we dive into this Oscar nominee ranking, while everybody else who's going to be walking across the stage is getting their reward on Oscar night, if you're somebody that plays mobile games, it's time for you to get your reward. So check out the sponsor of today's video, Misplay.
Like many of you, I love video games. Whether it's just to curl up for a couple of hours and relax and unwind for the day, or if you're sitting in line or waiting at the doctor's office and you have to pull out one of those mobile games to help the time pass, video games are life. And putting a lot of time and energy into your favorite video game can be incredibly rewarding. Breaking onto a new level, unlocking a new character, defeating that dreaded high score. But wouldn't it be nice if all that time you spent had an even greater reward? Misplay is a loyalty app for us gamers with a huge catalog of mobile games where you actually earn points for your gameplay. And the more you play, the more you earn. Whether you're looking for a little help with your Amazon purchases or even funding your gaming catalog on your PlayStation or Xbox, with Misplay, it's just a matter of playing your favorite mobile games and banking rewards. Two of my favorite games that I've discovered through Misplay is Sniper 3D, which is a sweet and simple assassin simulator, as well as Storm Shot, which takes my love for gunplay video games and pushes it into the realm of puzzle solving. Normally I would only pull these games out if I'm waiting at a doctor's office or if I'm doing a double feature on new release night in between movies, but now that I use Misplay, anytime I have downtime whatsoever, I pull these games out and keep earning those points working towards my PlayStation gift card. So if you're ready to earn while you game, go to misplay.com/Cody or click the link in the video description to download Misplay for free. Sign up today and you'll get 200 bonus points, plus use my code CODY50 inside the app for an additional 50 free points to help towards redeeming your first gift card. See the video description for all the details. And thank you so much to Misplay for sponsoring today's video.
Coming in at number 10 for me is going to be Maestro. This is Bradley Cooper's newest film. Bradley Cooper's been an actor who's been in the limelight for quite a bit. And he also did a film a couple of years ago that also got a lot of awards consideration, which was A Star is Born. And that I much prefer that film to Maestro. Maestro is a very well done movie. You have the combination of Bradley Cooper's passion for this person, this composer, and really diving just completely into this role and transforming his face to look as much like him. And also that there's been reports out there, maybe even quotes from him, that he spent like 6 years working on just this one scene of him composing this piece of music. And the issue with this movie for me personally is just it's not really subject matter that I care too much for. You know, this was the last movie that I watched on this list. I didn't even watch it in 2023. And it's just because as much as I like Bradley Cooper and as much as I certainly have him on my radar as a filmmaker after A Star is Born, this just isn't a topic or a person of interest that garners much interest from me. And when I watch the movie, it really is pretty slow for me because I'm not really that invested in it. It's talking about not only just a biopic of this composer, but it's also going into his sexuality and, you know, kind of a sign of the times where being a homosexual was certainly frowned upon, and him having this relationship with this woman. Very similar to a bit of the storyline that was in Bohemian Rhapsody that was explored with Freddie Mercury, where he was obviously a gay man, but also very much loved this woman who was kind of the love of his life. And similar to that, And so it's talking about this man's life, of which he's somebody that I'm just not particularly all that interested in. So, at the risk of repeating myself over and over again, it's a very well made movie. I could see why some people would really love this one. I could see why somebody who is passionate for this composer would want to dive into his life and go as in depth as they go with the way that Bradley Cooper does. But it's just not a story that's all that interesting for me, and I would never rewatch it. And I don't know who I would recommend it to. The other negative side of this one, which isn't really too much of an issue for me, but it's something I've seen shared probably maybe more so than any of these other nominees, is this movie's really got a campaign held against it to where people are really giving Bradley Cooper a lot of shit for like obviously baiting for an Oscar with this movie, with this role, with this performance, with, diving 6 years into one scene. And I don't know if that's fair or not. I think that there is validity to watching a movie and feeling like they're really desperate for an Oscar, and maybe that being a bit of a turnoff. I've been there. But at the same time, I don't know if that is a fair way to kind of downgrade the quality of what is going on here. Bradley Cooper's certainly been like a punching bag for Twitter over the last number of months. Everything the guy has said in regards to Maestro has been unpacked, and he's just been, quote, tweeted all to hell about not wanting chairs on set, and that he spent 6 years on this scene. And there was a video that came out not too long ago where he's sitting with this man's kids and breaks into tears when he's never actually met him. And I see both sides of it. I see an artist's passion and how it can be misrepresented, and I also see a little bit of getting some cringe value out of that. But nonetheless, of the 10, this is the one that I enjoyed the least. And as far as its chances to win Best Picture, I'm going to say it's probably the 7th out of 10 here as far as the likeliness that it'll win with the information that I have. Coming in at number 9 is Past Lives. This was another film I did not watch in 2023 and was one of the last movies that I watched for this list. And this is kind of a romance drama, and you have two people that were very close friends as children, and one of them moves away, and they try to reconnect later on, but their lives have developed so much since then that it causes a lot of conflict. And even though they both want each other, the reality of life kind of keeps them away from each other. And by the end of the movie, when one of them finally takes the time to actually go and meet this other person and to not let life get in the way, it's too late. So it's one of those movies that it unpacks the reality of how relationships go. It's not glamorized. It's not a kind of your cliche romance type story. It's very much like kind of the bittersweet reality of how things go all the time in real life. And so I think there's value to that. It's not, again, much like Maestro, it's not really a movie for me. I was interested in it. I was intrigued by it, and it held my attention, but by the end of it, it's another movie that I probably would never watch again, and it would be a very select few people that I would recommend this to. So well done movie if you like romance and you want to kind of experience more of the real side of romance, not the glamorized Hollywood version of it. And just because I don't really see anybody talking about this movie, I'm going to put this as the 10th most likely to get the Best Picture, the least likely to me. Now, you could always get surprises in there. Yeah, I feel like the Best Picture nominee oftentimes is a big surprise, and we'll get more into that later on. But yeah, I don't know. This is the one movie on this list that I have not seen a single person, at least in my circles or in the social media that I roll in, talk about how this might be the upset winner against Oppenheimer. Number 8 is a movie called Zone of Interest, and this was one of the last movies, if not the last movie that I watched last year. I can't really remember, but this was one of the last movies that I watched in 2023 before doing my big fat end of the year ranking. And this was an interesting one because this movie is very much like it's all an experience. There's not so much of a very standard narrative being told. There's not like character arcs going on. It's just about putting you in this situation and letting you experience this piece of history, this very horrific piece of history. And essentially what Zone of Interest is you have this guy who is a very a higher ranking Nazi during the time of the Nazis during the World War II. And you have him and his family staying on this little isolated mansion, basically this isolated little paradise that is right next to a concentration camp. And the entire movie takes place within the confines, this fenced in yard of this very beautiful house with servants and this Nazi and his wife and his kids. And so all throughout the movie, you're basically just watching this Nazi family go through all the mundane, everyday tasks that, make Monday through Friday bleed together for most of us. All the while, just past their fence line is some of the most horrific events in world history. And it's all through sound design. It's the sound design of trains entering and leaving this concentration camp, hearing gas chambers get turned on, hearing screams, hearing gunshots. And the sound design, if you're going to give this movie an award, it should be for the sound design and the person that crafted all of that, because that is what makes this movie, and that is what the entire experience of the movie hinges on. Beyond appreciating that, though, I did find the movie to be a little bit boring. Like, I got into it. I understand what the movie was going for. It certainly was effective, and I thought it was a very interesting way to explore the horrors of that time in a very non-conventional way, where we've seen a lot of movies do more the Hollywood style of it and glamorize it and give you the more, quote-unquote action-packed version of all of that, or just really put you right into it and directly show you all of these things. But choosing to show the evil of the indifference of people is something that's really interesting, showing that how some of these people in that time period were literally right next to some of the most horrific events in world history and just didn't give a fuck. It just didn't affect their daily life whatsoever. It was just like hearing somebody mowing the lawn next door. You don't even pay attention to it. It just fades into the background. So very interesting. Just not a movie that I would watch again. It's a one and done type experience for me. And that's kind of a running theme for a lot of Oscar consideration movies for me. That's just what my movie taste is. Agree with that or don't, doesn't matter. It's my taste. And this is something that probably even more so than past lives. Again, I'd be very selective with who I would recommend this to. Pretty much just film fanatics and cinephiles. But yeah, very interesting movie, amazing sound design, but not a movie that I would ever buy or watch again. But given the subject matter of this movie and the power of what it does achieve with the way that it decides to tell its story and the devices it decides to use to tell its story, I think this one's actually pretty likely to be a Best Picture winner. I think that this one, it feels like one of those movies that the Oscars would give the big award to because of the importance of what the message is. So I'm going to say this is the third most likely to win that Oscar in a week and a half. Number 7 is going to be Anatomy of a Fall, and this was another movie that I watched very late in the year last year, and this is one that it was, again, very interesting and non-conventional way to tell the story that it's deciding to tell. This is essentially a courtroom drama, and you have this, it's a woman, her husband, and her young child, and one day they come back to their house, and the father has fallen off of the roof seemingly and died. And so it becomes an investigation of whether or not this was an accidental death or somebody killed him, and the prime suspect is the wife, the mother of this child. And so the whole movie is essentially a courtroom drama painting the picture of what this family's life is and what the contention between the wife and the husband was. And it's a very interesting courtroom drama because it's not nearly as flashy or as like impactful in its individual moments as some of the best courtroom dramas that we all love. Think of like A Few Good Men or Primal Fear. It's much quieter. It's much more subtle. And by the end of the film, the overall message, the overall theme that they're trying to convey with this very kind of subtle and mundane take on courtroom drama is that the truth is what you make of it. You think about the court system, and I know a lot of us don't trust the court system. Some of us might. But the reality is, unless you're a psychic, you don't ever really know 100% whether a judgment was correct or not. There's plenty of people that have been convicted of a crime that were 100% innocent. There are plenty of people that have been exonerated for a crime that were guilty as sin. And it's just a matter of people's interpretation of the details, of the stories, of the testimonies, and them giving their best guess as to what happened. That's the scary reality of the justice system. Unless there's just irrefutable evidence, which I don't think that is the case more times than not. it's your best guess. And so you have this scenario that is presented with this wife, and you are given plenty of reasons to believe that she would kill this man, and you are given plenty of reasons to believe that she would not, and he just had a very, very bad morning. And the movie kind of leaves you off at a point where you don't really ever get a clear answer from the film on what the truth is. It leaves you to kind of figure that out for yourself. And that's very much a reflection of what the reality of courtroom is, of what the justice system is. So I thought that was pretty profound. I thought that was interesting. It's also a movie that was a bit too long for me. It's over 2 hours. It is a very slow, dialogue-heavy film. And while there's parts that are very compelling, as I said, it's a very subtle movie. And so it did struggle to maintain my interest past the first hour quite a bit. And then when it finally wrapped up, I was like, okay, that's interesting. That's profound. That's different. I don't know if I needed 2 hours and 20 minutes or however long this movie is to get there. But yeah, I enjoyed it. But again, not a movie I'd ever watch again. And much like Zone of Interest, I think this one actually is up in the higher end of probability of maybe walking away with that Oscar. I think that the importance and the implications of what they're saying here, paired with a lot of the acclaim that the performances have gotten, and it just being a very non-conventional type of movie for that genre of courtroom drama, I'm going to say it's the fourth most likely to win the Best Picture Oscar. Number 6, we have Poor Things. And, this movie is very interesting. I see why a lot of people are taken away with it and are just loving it and are enamored with it. I also see why a lot of people don't like it whatsoever. It's very fucking weird. It's a very strange movie. There's a pseudo Frankenstein flavor here where essentially you have Willem Dafoe, who is a scientist that reanimates this dead woman who is played by Emma Stone and puts a child's brain into her. And so the movie is kind of her rebirth, and very quickly seeing how she matures from a childlike understanding of the world into a mature woman's understanding of the world. It very much focuses on female empowerment and sexual liberation, especially. It's a very graphic movie as far as sexual situations and sex scenes go. And so it's interesting to watch. It is never boring. It is never a movie that fails to have your attention. I think Emma Stone is all but a lock for Best Actress, and she absolutely deserves it if she does win. She goes places that you've never seen her go in this movie. And she fully commits. Also, I thought that Mark Ruffalo was really good here and was surprisingly hilarious. Like, he's not an actor that I typically associate with funny, and maybe I just haven't seen enough of his work, but he's genuinely funny here as somebody that is just so obsessed with Bella and has this very toxic dependency on her. So he was very good. But it's a very odd movie. Like, the story in and of itself is strange, but there's these extra little artistic details that are thrown in there that it turns me off when there's not like an immediate understanding by the end of the film of what some of these things' purpose was. Like, continuously throughout the film, Willem Dafoe has this thing where he's eating dinner and he'll just stop and go, and a big ass bubble will come out of his mouth and he like burps up a bubble and it just starts to float around the scene. Weird shit like that I look at and I'm like, okay, what is the point of that? What does that add? What is the message or the symbolism there? Like, what purpose does that have other than just making this extra fucking weird? And so that kind of stuff will turn me off as a viewer very quickly if by the end of the film I don't find that there's a purpose for it. And, sometimes later on I can read maybe the director's idea for that or the screenwriter's idea for that, and it can make some sense. I have not done that with that for this film, but there's just things like that held this back where I'm like, okay, it leans on pretentious for me, where it's just weird for weird's sake. But nonetheless, it's a movie that was interesting. I wouldn't say I'd never watch it again. It wouldn't be very high on my rewatch list, and I would be very selective with who I recommended this to. You want to see Emma Stone get railed as a Frankenstein monster with a children's brain? This is the movie for you. It's very strange, but yeah, Poor Things. For as much as people are loving Emma Stone's performance, deservedly so, I haven't seen a whole lot of buzz for this as being the best movie of the year. So I'm going to put this in the lower rung. I'm going to say that this is the 8th most likely to win the Oscar. Number 5, we've got Barbie, kind of the most mainstream movie, I would say, of this entire list here. And Barbie was interesting. Barbie was a movie that I didn't really know what the hell this was going to be. I couldn't really interpret what the marketing was. I thought it was all very strange and nondescript. And by the time you see the movie, it's an interesting experience. It's much more interesting and thought-provoking and conversation meriting than you would think a Barbie movie would ever be on paper. So this is a movie that very much takes the more adult and a little bit more mature route with the Barbie character and is exploring the female role in society versus the male role in society and using the Barbie world and the rules of the Barbie world and contrasting that directly with the rules of the real world for satirical effect. And it does a really good job at that for the most part. Sometimes it gets a little heavy-handed, especially in the last, 20 minutes of the movie. But overall, I thought it was very clever with what it was trying to do. And that's the type of movie that I appreciate. If you're going to lean into social commentary and giving a message about modern society or gender roles or any of these things that people that are movie fans generally just roll their eyes when they hear that's the main message of the movie because it's just so overdone and poorly done more times than not. This is one of those times where they genuinely put a lot of effort into making it fun and making it creative and putting such a creative spin on it that it does create thought-provoking experience. So I appreciated all of that about it. I thought it was an interesting movie that, while neither of my daughters, I think, are old enough to care to rewatch it so much, if it does become a movie that they want to rewatch, and I did buy it for them, that I would not mind watching this movie a couple of times. I thought that especially Ryan Gosling was very fun as Ken, and having the Matchbox 20 stuff, that's great for me. So I had fun with this one. Could have been a little tighter with its message. Could have been a little bit better with hammering home some of its themes in a more I would say a more even way without getting into too much description. You can check out my review if you want more context what I'm talking about there. But I enjoyed this one. But as far as Best Picture, I don't know. This one seems to be an odd one in the Oscars, to where we've seen some things get nominated and some things not get nominated. It's caused a lot of controversy. And I'll be honest, aside from the screenplay and the direction, I don't really understand Barbie being a Best Picture nominee or people getting up in arms about Margot Robbie not getting Best Actress nominations and stuff. I've seen Margot Robbie do better in other things. She was great in the movie, but I've seen her do better in other things. So even Ryan Gosling, as much as I liked him, I thought that was an odd pick for Best Supporting Actor. Maybe it's just because there's a lack of competition this year. But yeah, Barbie's a weird one, so I'm going to put it, somewhere in the middle. I think it's probably the 6th likely to win Best Picture. I think that would be a giant shock, while also being like, oh, okay. Of course. That's how they make up for not nominating Greta Gerwig as the director, is they just give Best Picture. They've done that plenty of times. Ben Affleck, plenty of times for Martin Scorsese. So once you kind of know some of the Oscars playbook, Barbie's not super unlikely to pull away the win. Coming in at number 4 is going to be The Holdovers, and this was a movie that I was very excited to check out because it was not on my radar, and I think it was the month that it came out, it ended up being my buddy Sean's number 1 movie of that month, and he was just really going crazy praising it, and so I was like, oh shit, let me put that on my radar. Watched it, and it's a movie that I actively want to rewatch, and when I get a chance, I'd like to watch it with my wife again because I really enjoyed it. I think I might have been a bit overhyped on it. And I think that it was a really good old school, just comfort movie, just an enjoyable movie you throw on during the holidays. It's like a warm blanket. And I love those types of movies. And this is going to become that movie for a lot of people. Paul Giamatti is amazing. I love that guy. He can do so many different things. And I think he's a really heartwarming role here. Even I forget the kid's name, so forgive me for that, but the one who is playing the main kid is playing off of Paul Giamatti. This was his first role ever, and he's great. And the movie was just a bit too long. For a movie like this, one of those old school movies that you just throw on for comfort, I think of things like John Hughes movies. They were always like hour and a half, hour and 45, movies you didn't have to dedicate like a whole afternoon to watching, a movie that you could just throw on and just have a nice, comforting experience. And kind of a sign of the times, a lot of the movies are just extended runtimes nowadays, and this was like a 2.5 hour film, and I didn't feel it needed to be. There was not like specific sections of the movie where I'm like, just cut this whole thing out, but it did kind of lose me a bit, where I felt like I was into it, and then it just kind of kept going. And the sweet spot of being that true classic comfort movie for me was passed by at least 20 minutes, maybe even a half an hour. Maybe that'll change when I finally do rewatch this. This is also a movie I watched towards the end of the year when I had already watched like 120 films, and a lot of them were 3 hours by the end of the year when you start getting into the Oscar contenders that we're talking about on this list. So that's certainly something that could have affected my experience, just fatigue with movies in general. But a very enjoyable movie that I do really want to rewatch sooner than later. And I'm going to put this one right in the middle as fifth most likely to win the Best Picture. I don't typically see the fun, crowd-pleasing movies walk away with the Oscar. More times than not, it's the movies that have some kind of a strong message, or a foreign film, or a movie that really hammers home a theme. So Holdovers, despite being one of the movies on this list I think most people would enjoy, as far as the masses of movie fans, it's somewhere in the middle as far as the movie itself. While Paul Giamatti, he might pull off the Oscar. Number 3 for me is the big dog Oppenheimer. And this is a movie that for some reason people really take issue with the fact that I am not like in love with this fucking movie. It was in my top 20, I believe, maybe top 25 of the year. I gave it 4 out of 5, if not higher. I said pretty much all positive things about it, but this is just a movie that I appreciate more than I enjoy. It's a 3-hour film that's mostly dialogue about the creation of the nuclear bomb in World War II. And that's just not a subject that I'm all that interested in. I think that Oppenheimer does a fantastic job at making it interesting. Christopher Nolan's a phenomenal director. I think that this is going to be his year. And I think that Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt and all the other massive amount of cast members here, Robert Downey Jr., probably a lock for a win. They all do fantastic. Like, on paper, everything is done perfectly, damn near, with this movie. It's just not a story. It's not an experience that my movie taste appreciates on the level that a lot of you have. And that's fine. It should be okay to say that. So it's a movie that I watched it after Barbie. It wasn't directly after. It was later on that night. But this was a film that I thought was a very interesting experience. I think that it was a very interesting way to have kind of Nolan's spin on a historical courtroom drama biopic. I think that it was really effective at hammering home its overall message. And by the end of the film, when I walked out, I did feel less safe in the world that I live in. And I think that's the point of the movie. I think that there's a lot of sequences in it, especially from a visual standpoint, like when he's giving the speech and he's seeing everybody's face get melted off. And all of that was just really, really well done. And for a movie with like no digital shots, no CGI, like again, old school filmmaking. Thank you, people like Christopher Nolan, for keeping that stuff alive. But for my taste, I much prefer the Christopher Nolan films that are the wild, crazy concepts, that are the sci-fi or the borderline horror concepts. Like, I will take the Inceptions and the Prestige, and even though I don't like Tenet very much, I'll take the Tenets over the Dunkirks and the Oppenheimers. I think it's important for him to have range, and I think that he has shown that Christopher Nolan could pretty much do whatever the hell he wants, and he can do it phenomenally. And his worst day at the office is better than 99% of directors' best day at the office. And I really hope one day he does a horror film, because I want to see his spin on that. But yeah, I'm just not really a history buff. So it is what it is. I liked Oppenheimer. It's number 3 on this fucking list, but there's some people that are going to be pissed that it's not number 1. Get over it. But with all that being said, I do think this is number 1. I think this is the lock for Best Picture. And anything else that gets the win is going to be categorized as an upset, even if it's a very deserving film. I think this is Christopher Nolan's year. I think it's just the right time, with the right movie, with the right subject matter, with the right cast, and the right amount and level of competition, that he's going to walk away with most, if not every Oscar that this thing is nominated for. This is going to be like a Return of the King situation. And if he does not, that is going to be the talk of film Twitter for the next 2 months, about how Christopher Nolan was robbed and the disrespect. But yeah, I do think Oppenheimer is most likely to walk away with the Oscar. Coming in at number 2 is a movie called American Fiction. That was another movie that I watched very late in the year, was not on my radar at all. Didn't even know what the hell this thing was about. I am just a big fan of Jeffrey Wright, and that is what made me click on this. All I saw was the poster or the artwork where he is a guy in a suit, and then there's like a drawing around him that makes him look like a thug. And I was like, what does that mean? Just that's all I had to go off of. And essentially what this movie is, it's kind of a movie of two halves, two different stories going on. It's like a family drama about this guy who his mother's going through dementia. His brother is gay. He's got like a drug addict habit. He's a bit wild. And it's about him kind of trying to get his family back together to a certain extent and dealing with the contention of those relationships. But the other side of the movie, the more prominent, the more flashy part of it, is that he is an author that is very educated and takes everything serious and wants to succeed, but hasn't really had any success with his career as an author. And he very much believes and airs this frustration that Black literature or Black stories in America are only valued when they dive into crime and the hood and the struggle and things like that. And like there's even scenes where he's watching TV and he flips over and it's like a marathon of the best Black stories, and it's all like Menace to Society and Boys in the Hood and shit like that. And so out of spite, he kind of speed writes this novel that is like the most on the nose, cliche, offensive Black crime story as kind of like a unsubtle fuck you to his grievance of that. And much to his dismay, this joke novel that he writes becomes an overnight hit and starts to get all of the awards and the acclaim and the accolades that he has been craving his entire career. And it's so funny the way that it explores all of that. And Jeffrey Wright is so awesome at not only his dramatic side of things in this movie, but his very humorous side of things in this movie. And again, much like Barbie, this is a movie that touches on some very important and some very touchy subjects that in many lesser films, again, will make an audience roll their eyes and prepare for an agenda-based movie. But this is one that does it so cleverly and so funny and so well satirically that it's really enjoyable. And so I had a lot of fun with this movie and got some of the best laughs out of the year. And the way that they blend those two very different storylines together, it's just a really good, enjoyable movie. And this is one of the movies on this list that I've actually recommended to the most people because it's one of those films that's going to fly under the radar for those that aren't following awards season or those like me that don't watch as many movies as possible. But for an awards contender, I think it's a very enjoyable movie that most people would like. So that one I had a lot of fun with. And it's a movie that when it comes out, I will buy it. I will watch it again. And much like with Jeffrey Wright as Best Actor, I think American Fiction has the highest chance to be the upset winner. I'm going to say this is the second most likely to win Best Picture because of the message, because of how well it balances a movie that is very much an award season type movie and also a movie that is very crowd pleasing. I think that it balances that even a bit better than Holdovers for my taste. But even Jeffrey Wright, I think that the race right now for everybody is between Cillian Murphy and Paul Giamatti. And anytime that it feels like we are overly confident about who the two frontrunners are, or who the one frontrunner is, about 50% of the time it seems like there is this dark horse that comes out of nowhere. And I think Jeffrey Wright has a chance at being that dark horse for Best Actor. I would not be surprised whatsoever if he takes it over Cillian and Paul Giamatti. But yeah, American Fiction, highly recommend it if you have not seen it. I think it's a very enjoyable, very smart, very clever movie. And in a time where I feel like comedy is all but dead in film, this is one of the movies that I think genuinely made me laugh the most last year. But coming at number one for me was Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. This one did make my top 10 of the year, and I was not on the hype train for it. Of course, I'm always excited and interested to check out a Scorsese film, but I was not overly crazy about The Irishman, which was his last film that he did that was this big, monstrous epic. I heard this was 3.5 hours long, an Apple TV movie, because he couldn't get studios to produce this. And I just started thinking, oh, like what, 3.5 hours? What is this? What's it going to be, Marty? What's it going to be? And I walked into this pretty much blind. I didn't know what the story was. Of course, I had seen clips from the trailers. I didn't watch the full trailer, but I did not know the history that he was going to be portraying in this movie. And it's an absolutely horrific and devastating story of American history. And it's one of those movies that as much as I have bitched, even on just this ranking alone about movie runtimes, this is a film that, despite being 3.5 hours long, I think it earns that runtime because it wants to really hammer home how hopeless and how horrific and how evil these events were, to where you spend about a good 2.5 hours in the story with no signs of hope whatsoever. And it is taxing. I mean, you sit there and you're just like, Jesus, can we get some relief? Can there be some justice on the way? It's just fucking murder, 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 betrayal, betrayal, murder, betrayal. And I think that makes the movie all the more effective, that it takes almost the length of most lengthy films to start to get to the hope. And it's only in the last hour or so that you start to get the FBI investigation and the courtrooms and, the justice and all of that. But performances all across the board were incredible. The standout for me was Robert De Niro, which, I mean, anytime you say Robert De Niro or, Leonardo DiCaprio are great, especially in a Martin Scorsese film, it almost feels like nobody cares because we know that's going to happen. It's just expected. But Robert De Niro, I think this is one of his better roles in a long time because he's just genuinely evil. And it's not like mustache twirling evil. It's subtle evil. And I think it's very effective. I thought it was interesting to see Leo play a character that's kind of more of a dipshit. He's not like the hero. He's not he's not the flashy character that he usually is, even if he's a bad guy. He's the pawn. He's the guy who's being told what to do, and he's just too stupid to challenge any of it until it's too late. And that was an interesting change of pace for him. Lily Gladstone, somebody that, again, I think is possible to maybe be the upset, if you want to call it that. I hate that word because it's just like, if they deserve it, it shouldn't be an upset. But the person that might dethrone the front runner, let's put it that way, of Emma Stone for Best Actress. And so I really like this movie. Is it a movie I'm going to rewatch all that often? No, because there's not enough time in the day to fucking rewatch this movie. But it is one that, of the, epic scale Oscar contender type movies, that I got a lot out of this one. If you stack this one next to Oppenheimer, two filmmakers that are at the top of the game, that are, every time they release a movie, you expect it to be a Best Picture nominated movie, if not a winner. To me, I got much more out of Killers of the Flower Moon than I did Oppenheimer, and that's just because of my movie taste. Crime and devastation, all that kind of stuff. I'm a horror fan. That just resonates a bit more with me than courtroom drama or historical biopics. So Killers of the Flower Moon was my personal favorite of all these movies, with a very close second being American Fiction. However, I think this is the 9th most likely, and I definitely sat on that for a second and debated on making this the least likely to win Best Picture. Martin Scorsese has been treated very weird by the Oscars, to where he's gotten a ton of nominations, but the times that he has won, pretty much everybody historically is like, for that one? Like, I love The Departed. The Departed is probably my second favorite film he's ever made. But everybody always feels weird that he finally won Best Director for that and not Raging Bull or Goodfellas or Casino or any of the other, Martin Scorsese classics. And it just feels like he's at that point in his career where he's gotten so much awards consideration as well as award wins that I don't feel like the Oscars are going to hand things out to him unless he just absolutely stomps everybody's ass. And I don't think Killers of the Flower Moon is quite that movie this year. So I don't think it's very likely it's going to win Best Picture or Best Director. I hope it pulls away at least Best Actress, if anything. But yes, it was my favorite of the nominees. So my number one. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, I'm going to put my ranking of all 121 films I saw last year right here, and 8 of these movies are on that list, so you can check that out. I'm also going to put my review of Killers of the Flower Moon up here for you to check out, get more in-depth thoughts on. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.